Everybody.
Hey, Susie.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. All right. Well, it's nice to see some faces. It's kind of fun because we've got folks all over the state and in other states, and Catherine's at Grandfather Mountain, sort of, so to speak, on the Mile High Bridge. So thanks everybody for coming together. We have prepared a draft report based on the comments that we've gathered over the last few months being together. So I'm going to just welcome everybody. Thank you for everything you've done, taking the time out of your busy schedules to work with us on this on behalf of the governor. I'm going to let Catherine tell you a little bit about the methodology we used to put the plan together, put the report together, and then we're just going to pretty much go through it page by page, however you all want to get your comments into the record. And let me emphasize, this is a draft. We have no pride of authorship over it. It's based on the comments that the council made and observations that we've all shared with one another over the years during this process of trying to bring film back to North Carolina. And pardon me for shortening the term just to film. I guess I should call it production. So with that, Catherine, I'm going to let you dig into some of the methodology. Then we will go through the report, and then we're going to ask Guy to just give us his general update on things that are happening around the state right now, which seems to be all pretty good news. So with that, Ms. Catherine.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to ask if members of the press could please identify themselves on the call. No press? Okay, just curious. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to do a quick screen share. And to talk a little bit about the methodology, we did send this out yesterday. It's obviously still a draft and not ready for sharing, but I wanted to just go through the charge. So the charge from the governor was to provide recommendations to grow and retain the film, television, and digital streaming industry in North Carolina and serve as a forum for filmmaking matters. So the council, as you know, includes 25 selected members from the industry. We have our meeting schedule laid out from the beginning. And the methodology, of course, was we had our first meeting and talked about the charge. And then we had our second meeting and we identified these 5 kind of categories around improved and updated messaging, grant rebate policies and statutes, access diversity, marketing, and industry expansion. And as you know, that we had our breakout groups, compiled the notes from the breakout groups, put them in the draft recommendations, and our charge today is, of course, to go through those and in the hopes that they are reflective of everyone's input from the council and includes everything that we would want to share up to the governor's office for recommendations for improvement. So thank you all for taking the time to read through it and give comments, and we look forward to hearing what everybody has to say and want to make it a really compelling list of recommendations. So with that said, thank you, and I'll hand it over to Guy to give us a quick update on where we are right now in the film office.
Great, thank you, Catherine. Oops. Let me go here so I can share as well. And Catherine, I think I'll need help if you're hosting the meeting or maybe for Matt. Okay, thank you.
I'll point out Tim is on set in Atlanta, so that's pretty cool to have a live production on this call today.
Like,
Okay,
do we
God,
have to
thank you.
point out that he's in Atlanta, Catherine?
Yeah,
No.
really.
Well, see, hence why we're here
Salt
today.
in the wounds.
That's why we're here today.
With it. So, all right. So I've just got a few kind of updates to share, and keeping them in the same form as you will on what has been shared on previous meetings of this advisory council. So, 2020, like everything else, our office will probably have a giant asterisk beside it. As we continue to adjust estimates and adjust numbers according to what COVID-19 has done to project timelines. But at this point, there are 52 projects that have completed their intent to film form with the state office. As we've discussed at length, as a reminder that these projects do include local projects. Many of the forms that are completed are projects that do not qualify for the film grant program, thus the numbers being so much smaller on, as you see the little sub-bullet there, 9 projects that are having some sort of production taking place this year that have been approved for the grant rebate. That doesn't necessarily mean 9 new projects just for 2020, but there's definitely some activity with that. That has resulted in an estimated 11,000 plus crew hires, 730 talent opportunities, and over 8,000 extras opportunities. Those numbers actually are looking to exceed 2019. However, our estimated direct in-state spending is projected to be down from last year's high due to the impact that COVID-19 has had and the kind of adjusting of when some spending will take place. So right now we're sitting at a little over 107, close to $108 million in estimated spending. Filming has once again taken place in all 8 of the state's prosperity zones. And it's a key note here, while we are in September and in the second half of the calendar year, we are still getting inquiries here at the state office about major projects wanting to come in before the end of 2020. And in terms of feature-length films, be completed before the end of December. There are some television series that we're talking with and/or streaming series. They're looking to try and set up offices and be on the ground here before the end of the year, but may not actually begin shooting until 21. So a comparison number, just again, this is an update for you, looking at how that spending compares year over year. Again, I remind you that 2020 is likely to adjust both as we get more updated information from productions on how COVID-19 affected their shooting plans, as well as any new productions that come in here in this little more than a quarter left. And then again, there are those job opportunity numbers, totals. So one thing that I think was also key to share with you all, as you may recall in our July meeting, we talked about the number of projects being impacted by COVID-19. Again, these are more of the major productions that the film office focuses on recruiting. We had about 158 million in spending that was on hold with 9 major productions pending. I'd like to say I'm happy to report. I don't know what kind of emotion I feel with it, but from a numbers standpoint, here is now in gold showing how those numbers have been updated. Again, 68.6 million still on schedule for 2020. We have over 60 million that will now be part of 2021. A good portion of those monies are actually for 2 television series and at least one major feature-length film that have pushed that will have some of their production or all of it taking place next calendar year. So it actually has set us up nicely when looking at it from that standpoint. There's still a little over 12 million that is to be decided. The production companies are trying to figure out if they can shoot before the end of the year, if they need to push, or as we've already seen with at least one project, it's not moving forward at all. So that was a $16.4 million loss. And 5 of the 9 projects that we talked about in July have indicated that they are moving forward in some fashion. Again, 1 project is no longer moving forward, and then 3 are still deciding how they're going to adjust. And with that 3, I would be remiss if I didn't say some of that does fall into 2 pilots that we're shooting in the Wilmington area that are still, they may be leaning one way or the other, but not ready to give an official word. So those are still sitting there, and we're figuring out where that will go. Of course, that's what can end up shifting those spending figures that I mentioned before with it. So as always, you've got my contact information, but just in case, or you want to grab a screenshot, there it is. Happy to give more information or help enlighten on those numbers. But again, we're, all things considered, with COVID-19, we're doing fairly well and actually have a little bit of a prop, if you will, or we'll be going into 21 with business already on the books. And I would be remiss if I didn't say also that later today, the governor's office will be releasing figures in regards to 5 projects that have been selected for the Film and Entertainment Grant. So that will be coming out again later today, and those will help outline projects that we have discussed about here, but they include the feature film Parkside, the series Delilah, the series Hightown, which will be filming its 2nd season. We also have 2 made-for-TV movies that have actually started shooting right now. So those 5 projects have all been approved for the grant program for a rebate, and that information will be officially released by the governor's office today. So Catherine, that was my short update with it. I know we wanted to spend most of the time going over the draft report, so I turn it back over to you unless there are any questions from the council right now at this time.
Guy, I have a question. So those 5 projects you mentioned, where are those all shooting?
3 of them are in the Wilmington area, and 2 are in the Charlotte area.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Guy, I wanted something I wanted to add, that since we were last together, the governor has, we've facilitated 3 high-level meetings with the governor with the help of our fellow council member, Judy Gerard. We've met with Sony, Netflix, and the, oh gosh.
NBC Universal has also been one of the conversations.
Right. Disney as well, but that occurred several months back. And also with the Motion Picture Association out of DC. So we've had a lot of really wonderful high-level conversations that there's been good follow-up with through the governor's office, and the governor himself was the lead on all of these calls. So he's been very engaged all summer long, and we feel like these conversations have beget another conversation, if you will, and we feel really good about our positioning with the decision makers of those major brands. So
Guy, this may be a naive question. It actually is a naive question, I admit it. How much power does the producers or the Sony people or the people Susie just talked about, how much power do they really have versus the unions in deciding how to handle this virus, whether to shoot, whether to kill it, whether to put on hold?
Just like the decision on where to film, some of that, it varies project to project. I think that your bigger studio productions are starting to move forward. You know, the announcements that we have coming out today with the governor's office are all with bigger studios, and they are able essentially to have different insurance that covers them under their multi-conglomerate insurance policies, where production is not really taking place, is the independent feature in particular, because there is not a readily available COVID insurance plan that if the production were to shut down because an actor or the majority of the crew possibly contracted the virus, then you know, how those payments would be made out. So you know, Judy, it's a little bit of a mixed answer with it. Obviously, Tim's on set, you know, so the studios are with those bigger projects, you know, starting to move forward with it, but they're having to get sign-offs from the associated, the different associations, guilds, unions, if you will, you know, for having those workers on set. And each of those productions have produced their own COVID-19 mitigation standards or plans that they're following to try and be as safe as they can on those sets.
Thank you.
We've seen a lot of insurance, you know, legal cases around insurance.
And that is one of the questions that we got with the conversations where the governor was involved. They did talk quite a bit at that stage about the trouble with insuring the productions, but that was probably in the earlier part of July. It seems they've broken through some of that, but to Guy's point, it is affecting the smaller streaming, you know, the smaller production houses.
And
the larger ones are able to manage it.
Right. And to give you an idea, when some of those conversations probably took place with the governor, granted, this is more on a national level, but if you look at the UK, their national government has actually come together to create a COVID-19 insurance plan that helps cover all production. We are nowhere close to having something like that here in the US, but it has helped productions of all sizes get back up and going in the UK, whereas, you know, here in the US, it really is just these major studios that are starting to go at it again, because they have, you know, these big corporate insurance policies that can kind of cover it, whereas the independents just don't have that kind of money. And you're talking about a huge impact on their budgets if they were to have to shut down for, you know, 2 weeks because of having to isolate if something were to break out during production.
Guy, have there been any instances of infections arising on productions in North Carolina?
Not good question, Robert. None that have been reported, you know, from that. But again, we are just getting started with major production being underway. But, you know, there have been some commercials that have shot. Certainly there wasn't anything reported out of that, but those are, you know, very short term projects. But you know, right now, the 2 made-for-TV movies that are going knock on wood here, I've got a wooden table under my desk, so no major outbreaks or anything with it.
Any other questions?
Not a question, but a comment. I was going to hold it till later, but this might be a good time. You know, with the limits on production given COVID, there are opportunities, and something I wanted to mention later as we go through the plan is, you know, the emphasis on post-production as well. What we're seeing because of COVID, since so much post-production is happening remotely now we're starting to more than ever talk with companies in New York and LA that are feeling like, well, if we're going to do our post-production remotely, it doesn't matter where it's being done. And so because we have set up remote post services for years, now we've become attractive. So while production is shut down, or even if it isn't, post-production is another revenue stream for the state that we haven't been able to take advantage of. It's not reflected much in the plan.
Eric, I think that is a really good point. And post-production is something that we've talked about. And I think we want your assistance in developing that strategy a little more in the report, because I think that there's huge business opportunities there. And
Yeah,
you're right, they can do it from anywhere.
Sure. And just, you know, you mentioned Sony, Netflix, NBC, Disney. We're working on a project with one of those studios now and in talks with another. So this isn't hypothetical. And this is really a golden opportunity for our state and others, not only from a business standpoint, but now finally people from a quality of life standpoint are saying, well, if I can work from anywhere, I'm going to work in the mountains, or I'm going to be at the beach. I'm going to be in North Carolina. So this is our opportunity. And I'd love to see us, not just from a business standpoint, but just for the good of the state and well-being of others to be able to do this.
Eric, do you have a business? Is there like a business association that for post-production work that you're involved in, or anything of that nature where we could reach out?
We can talk. It's less of an association and more a direct conversation with production companies, producers of this type of content, the television networks and streaming platforms.
Okay, I like this idea, because we certainly could market North Carolina as a quality of life, you know, place to come and do business. Okay, well, let's are y'all ready to turn to the report? You think, is everybody ready to start digging into that a little bit? Okay. The only way I know how to do this, y'all, is to begin at the beginning.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to pull it up.
And for any of you who wish to, or would be so kind as to putting your comments back to us in writing, you know, things that we could use to cut and paste into the report. You know, we realize that, you know, we can go back and forth on this for a long time, but it would be really helpful if you would use your own words, Eric, in particular, with what you're talking about, so that, you know, ideas like that you all have, we can try to integrate properly into the report. So, Catherine, am I able to move through it, or I don't need to be able to move through it if you will keep it going?
I will. So can everyone see this? Okay, great.
Everybody got it? Okay. Go back, check your names, make sure we spelled everything right. So are we at there we go.
This is the beginning.
So this is just the overview. Has anybody got any comments they want to make? Do we miss something? Typos?
This is Robert. I just had a question, especially about the HB2. Is Netflix, do they have sort of a shadow ban on shooting in North Carolina or something?
Yes.
Not,
Okay.
well, go ahead, Bill Vassar. Yeah.
Yes.
Still, you think?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, but
we want to wait, and it's mainly the head of the company and make sure HB2 goes away.
So there's still
Right.
remnants of HB2 law that exist on the books that they're waiting for sunset on or something?
Yes.
Yeah, it expires in December.
And if y'all bear with me a minute, let me put a very fine point on what we're talking about. Going back, if everyone will recall, the House Bill 2 was a reaction to Charlotte establishing a law banning discrimination in their public facilities, their public jobs, if you will. And so that is what they were doing, so for a very large scale economic development project, who wanted to make sure that their employees were not going to suffer from any discrimination. The reaction from the leadership in the House and the Senate in North Carolina was HB2. The substantive pieces of HB2 went away when Governor Cooper took office. He worked very hard on getting that negotiated to get rid of those discriminatory pieces. The only thing that is left, which expires on December 30th, 2020, is a moratorium on local governments from being able to pass their own anti-discrimination laws. So that is all that exists at this point, is a moratorium on local governments from passing their own anti-discrimination laws. The Supreme Court took care of some of this a couple of 3 months ago with their ruling on LGBTQ as being a protected class. So the remnant that is still remaining from HB2 is a moratorium on local governments that goes away at the end of December this year. Am I right? I think I'm right about that, guy, right?
yes, except just minor correction. 142 expires December 1st, 2020.
Well, that's even better.
Yeah, 1 month extra does make a difference there. So
I'll take it.
And so then that means you can court Netflix starting in December to come back.
Well, Netflix was one in the list that the governor did talk with. Our conversation was very positive with the network's leadership, with the governor on the line. What happens, after the phone is hung up? Right. That's Bill Vassar obviously sees more of that day to day than we would, but we did have a positive conversation. And as we move down in the document, you'll see where we've listed the things that the governor has done through executive orders regarding discrimination in our state, which is all very positive.
Good.
We're a very, very attractive place to shoot because of our low COVID score. So as long as there aren't a lot of outbreaks here, I think we're in good shape. It's almost going to be impossible for Netflix to ignore North Carolina. Every other major studio has quietly done away with the ban on North Carolina. It's not official, but they've told their people they could look at North Carolina. And I mean, we've had a number of Warner Brothers projects look at us or work here since the beginning of the year. So I'm quite confident it will come back.
Isn't the content approval still a major problem, particularly for Netflix?
Yes. There's a.
I don't want to gloss over that because that's a big deal, right?
There is a law on the books. It's called harmful to minors, where you can't show minors drinking, having sex, but you can show them with a gun, which is bizarre to me. Yeah, that's on the books. Does that go away December 1st also?
no,
It doesn't, Guy.
No, and that's part of our recommendations, is to remove it in a future statutory change.
Do you think that if you've got politicians, legislators moving to change that, it's a political suicide?
I do not, because we were successful, I think, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, and getting some of that language out of there, or did we not tackle it in the budget bill? We may have left that out in the budget bill. Nonetheless, we think that it's frankly, it's indefensible because you can't really define it. So it needs to come out. And we think that there's support there to bring it out. I know Representative Davis would like to see it removed. He understands the problem with it. But we've been pretty liberal in how we apply that. Guy, do you want to tell us the conversations we've had that you and I talked about last week, that if it's not intended for an audience under the age of 18, if it's, rated mature or R, all of those things we feel like have absolved us of applying that standard when accepting or awarding grants.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's fair to say that when we look at projects to where this may be an issue, and there are, Judy, your adjective of a major problem is one that I go back and forth on. Is it or isn't it? Because there is plenty of content that's being produced that does not fall into that wormhole, if you will, with it. But I will say that the Department of Commerce has been very willing to look at the projects as a whole with the interpretation of harmful to minors, and we really are looking at, one, is it trying to use sex to appeal to minors? What is the intended audience with it, and how much of that, if you will, storyline, or how much does that continue to carry throughout the project with it? So I will say for feature-length films, it's a little more cut and dry because we know where the project's going. It's got a beginning and an end that's lined up. We can have those discussions with the production company. Where it is a true stumbling block is what we're mainly going after, which are television series, and that includes the streaming series. And that's simply because a lot of those projects, especially if they're starting from scratch, you're hoping are multi-year productions, and someone's not coming and saying, we know exactly what the storyline is going to be here from day one with that. So there is that stumbling block there on, is that ever going to come up as we go down the road with it? So it's a tightrope, and I will say that the production companies in general have been very understanding and played nice with us on that, but it certainly is one that I'm sure in back rooms it is definitely a strike against North Carolina because of with TV series not knowing where it's going. And those that are in the creative field can attest to it. Going in and telling the writers, you can't do this, is instantly, something that makes it very difficult for them to do their job. And quite frankly, I think then it keeps it front of mind of, but wait, we want to do this, whereas they might not have been thinking about it before. On that. So yes, I think that the governor has helped with this. The Department of Commerce has been a great champion on trying not to let that be a stumbling block for the state, but I fully acknowledge and would recognize that it definitely is for some productions. Yes.
So
Hey, I have a question. I know the answer. I just want everyone else to know. What would be the chances of a One Tree Hill or a Dawson's Creek moving forward today with this law in place?
That part I can't necessarily answer, but I will say that if those of you who followed Dawson's Creek, the very first season, there was a storyline with one of the main characters who was involved in a physical relationship with a teacher at the high school. And I don't know that that would work out very well with this harmful to minors clause right now. That said, I also don't know that a network would present that kind of storyline for that type of series right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your report here delves into the harmful to minors clause pretty deeply, and there's strong recommendations in this report to the governor to have it eliminated.
Susie, I have a question. As a former member of the House and being quite clever in the way you got things done, is this something that could be taken up with a whole bunch of technical changes from different bills?
That's how I would do it.
Okay.
Just bury it into the rest of it, because we also, as we move through the report, you'll see that we're supporting raising the caps, lowering the thresholds, some of compilation of what the governor did in his budget for 2017, was it? It's all running together now. May have been the 2018. But nonetheless, and then what the legislature actually did do, which is right here in the chart that Catherine is pulling up. So yes, Bill, that would be what we would do, is deliver. My goal would be, if assuming the governor does win his reelection, that we take these recommendations from the report, we put it into a legislative package, and we pick, senators and representatives from both sides of the aisle to run an identical bill in both chambers and get one moving and get these changes made, which could happen as early as February of next year.
As we dive in, Secretary Hamilton, could you just really quickly set the stage with who would the different audiences be for this report?
Well, this is our council report. Its intended audience is the governor and his administration. Obviously, the governor will use this. It's public. Mm-hmm. We would ask that you not share it right now unless somebody just insists, just because we're continuing to refine it. But yeah, as soon as it's to him, he will use this, hopefully, to influence the legislators to make these changes. Does that answer your question, Amy?
Yes. Does it ever go? Would it go to the studios and industry people as well, or not so much?
Well, we certainly can share it once it's a final product, but there are many of. Are you speaking of like a Sony or Netflix?
Yeah, and I'm really not meaning to advocate this. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at it through the right lens. Like, this is to help the governor make the case for the changes he wants to make.
Yeah, to improve our positioning. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But, on this call and on this council, we did appoint, quite a few leaders that some have international connections, and of course, Screen Gems is in how many states now, Bill? 3 or 4?
4.
4. Yeah. So yeah, just through that dissemination, that natural, y'all's participation, I think, y'all are also part of the audience. But yeah, this is intended to advise the governor. Okay. All right. Anybody else have some? Eric, you started out with a really good recommendation to us to refine more of that post-production. Anybody else want to jump in?
I just want to say, when Eric says post-production, seeing as how I also work in visual effects, I'd like to make sure post-production includes visual effects too, not just the editing side.
Okay. One of the things that I would like for us to be strong in our recommendations about is supporting new infrastructure, if you will, making sure that There's broadband available everywhere. That's being worked on several fronts right now. And, you know, building up our access to studio space throughout the state. And just looking forward, as Eric has shared with us, that, you know, in today's world, we really do have, it's a new frontier. Connectivity is a big deal, to being able to spread the work around. I think North Carolina makes a really good argument for quality of life. If you can work from anywhere, you might as well work from here. You know, those kinds of things. And and asking the governor to look at things maybe a little bit differently. I call it something like a JDIG grant that doesn't have that's focused on a capital investment as opposed to the number of full-time employees that are hired. So, you know, as we move forward, I don't know that we're going to get into any real specificity in this report, but for that kind of change. But as we move forward, I think that this group working with DNCR and Department of Commerce, the governor's office and the legislature, we could get real creative about how we engage contractually with the industry, involving the current grant program, but maybe involving other contractual obligations as well. You saw what happened in New Mexico last week. And Guy, I'm gonna maybe let you talk a little bit. New Mexico did some really creative things with Netflix. They have a $50 million grant fund every year. Netflix production activity based on this new campus development they've done, none of the work that they do hits that $50 million. So they actually went outside of their program to contract with Netflix in order to get this campus built and more work going on in their state. Did I sum that up okay, Guy?
Yes. And both Netflix and NBC Universal have signed contracts with the state of New Mexico that essentially are pledging to spend so many millions within a time frame. I apologize for not having it. I think it might be within 5 years, and create so many different job opportunities within the state. And as a result, they have essentially been excluded from, as Secretary Hamilton was mentioning, the state's annual payout cap. So any project that Netflix or NBC Universal does within the state does not count against what the state recruits from other production companies with that. And they have boots on the ground and have made commitments to not only do productions there, but invest in local infrastructure. And thus, you know, one advantage New Mexico did have, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, was the studio space that both Netflix and NBC Universal have taken were existing studios that were in financial trouble, or they essentially bought them out. That is a difference that New Mexico has, or an advantage that they have, that North Carolina doesn't necessarily have that type of space available or up for sale right now, that New Mexico did. But I think Secretary Hamilton is right in that there are opportunities to create that type of space.
The Netflix project that ultimately went to New Mexico started what, in 2015?
I believe that they were starting, yes, about that. I know it also coincided with an election year for the state of New Mexico.
So, but we do think we will see others engaging in this kind of investment. And so I think, particularly as COVID has come on, there seems to have been an increased interest in in that kind of campus development in the United States. And we want to be open to other ideas to make North Carolina attractive for that.
Can I also add that Netflix reached out to UNC School of the Arts for education and programming. So we are now partnering with Netflix to train in post-production. So there's the educational initiative also.
That's great.
Coming from the studio.
Yeah, that's terrific. We should, Lauren, if you'll help us highlight something like that.
Certainly, I will.
Yeah, thank you.
I think one other thing to look for as we go through the report is, anything that speaks to the stimulation of indigenous content generated from North Carolina. So much of our conversations about attracting studios, attracting people, and we want to continue to do that and grow that. But we also want to, make it possible for North Carolina-based creators to create series and benefit from, the incentive program. To not bring the work, but the work's here, to just keep it here. So I think that's another piece of the puzzle as we go through the report, to just look at that aspect. What happens if, half the productions that are coming in don't? How can we still be successful, without being totally dependent on others coming in with production?
Okay. Right. All right. So moving on, we're at the recommendation part. It has been suggested that maybe we need to be a little more aggressive, for lack of a better word, punchy in how we say this is what we think needs to be done. What are y'all's thoughts on how we've laid out the recommendations?
Is it going to anyone besides the governor?
Well, that's back to Dr. Tieman's question a few minutes ago, Bill. It's like, this is y'all's advice to the governor, but many others will see this.
Right, because you can't get anything done without going through the legislature.
That is correct.
So hoping for a change in the makeup of the legislature come November to assist Governor Cooper to get these things done. But
well, what we could shift the language a little bit to remind, just to say, Governor, this is the advice from your council in your negotiations with the North Carolina General Assembly, where necessary, to make these changes, because you're absolutely right. The changes that we're talking about have to go through the General Assembly for the most part.
And you're going to need a major change in who's controlling the House and the Senate.
That's right. The Senate in particular, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
The House has always been a lot friendlier.
Susie, I'm not sure I understand the second bullet point that's up there. What does that mean exactly?
Okay, so that was a holdover language from the original executive order under Governor Perdue that slipped into this executive order about local governments. Having said that, we internally went round and round and round about this. Back up to something I said earlier about using a economic development program that supports capital investments as opposed to, employees. The state would not necessarily be in a position to forgive local property taxes if someone were to go in and do what Netflix is doing in New Mexico, building a campus. But local governments could be in a position to offer local property tax reductions for that kind of capital investment. So we left it in, and it may need to be reworded because local production probably doesn't represent what I'm talking about. It should really probably read more along the lines of capital investments that are made on a local level, such as what Screen Gems has done for the last 30 years in Wilmington. They pay a lot of
I think
property
it could be clarified a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that help, Robert? Does that make better sense? Okay. We'll work on that.
Hey, this is Dave Burris. I'm kind of looking down at the last bullet point, the streamlined local, county, state permitting processes for production. That kind of jumps out to me as a potential headline to use. The simplification of the system, streamlining it, reducing the pitfalls. Georgia's system is so simple. You know, you basically tick these 3 boxes and you're good to go. I think, at least in my personal experience with a couple of the productions I was trying to get here, the executives in charge felt that the process seemed a little daunting. So I think there could be a way to headline that as a goal to, I think it manifests in the raising of caps and lowering of thresholds. I think that's sort of practically what happens. But headlining that as a way to make it very simple for non-film people and non-film financing people, i.e. legislators, to sort of understand. Basically say, we need to make this easier for people to do. We want to make doing business here in this particular industry easier. Okay. And I think there could be a way to headline that and make that kind of the top of the pyramid in a way.
So, Beth?
Sorry, Susie. Can we get a point of clarification though? It sounds like the example you just gave was a process for applying for the incentive in Georgia versus applying for the incentive in North Carolina, whereas I believe this is talking about getting a physical permit from a government entity that gives permission to shoot within that entity's jurisdiction.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not necessarily referencing the permitting process. Okay. I literally, this is just a matter of diction and word choice. The word streamline really jumped out to me as something that we could hold on to, or the governor could hold on to, while trying to promote the changes that the slightly more detailed changes to the process. That to me seems to be one of the big one of the goals, is just to make this easier for productions to come in, apply for this thing, and get business up and running here.
Okay.
I really agree. I'd love to see us work a little bit on just the way we're presenting it. And I know it's really hard to go through a draft all on the same time, but like if we can go back up to the previous page, like the distinction between what's in paragraph form and what's in bullet form. Some of the really, to me, what are some of the most important points are kind of in that paragraph is kind of like under the for example, when to me, those are like some of the most important points and not just any old example. So I think I like the word headline. Like, I think we should make our priorities clear and make it really pop out and put everything at least on the same footing that way.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Amy. Yeah.
And Susie, do we need to be more specific with the ask?
I think so. Yeah, I do, Rebecca.
Okay.
I think that's what we're trying to get to here. What we did was take the governor's executive order and try to use that language to the best of our ability, and then take all the subcommittee comments that we gathered and get that content into the document as well. But what's troubling me is that it's not jumping off the page as to what, like you said, the current minimum spend. I mean, that's the thing, right? That's got to be, we've got to figure out how to make these jump off the page a little better than they do right now.
Yeah, I think, of course, leave it to you guys to take my paragraph and reduce it to a sentence. Well done. Yeah, that's kind of the thing, at least in my experience with a couple of the networks and a couple of the productions that were interested. They kind of took a look at it, thought this is really Byzantine. There are too many pitfalls. There are too many possible hurdles that we're not going to be able to clear. So making it very, very lucid and very clear that that is the goal here, is to make this simpler and make it easy for people to come do business.
I'm just kind of thinking, I'm wondering if we might not ought to take a shot at just simply drafting a bill, so to speak, as an addendum to the document that lays out exactly what we want this to look like.
I love that idea.
I do too.
You know, you just can't, you can take the legislator out of the chamber, but I mean, that's really that's where this is headed, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I think too, this is John Bankson. I think it's really important that we figure out what our scope of work is specifically and who our target audience is. And if it's the governor, that's one audience. But if it's Phil Berger and the legislature, that's a totally different audience. Or if it's California film companies or New York film companies, I think if we can be precise in which group it is we're addressing specifically, will be more effective.
Well, make no mistake, your charge is to advise the governor. And so what he does with that advice is, you know, what he will choose to do. I mean, obviously he's relying on us, right? But he is the audience for now. So if he controlled the whole system, what would you ask him to do? And that's what he's counting on us for. So a lot of this is to educate, right? We've given a good history of where we were, where we are, where we'd like to be, is where the third leg of that stool is where we're struggling along, I think, a little bit in being clear and maybe literally just drafting what we want him to do in January or February is the way to get to that clarity.
I think that's a really good idea.
Okay. We got people that can do that. And Catherine, if you'll go back to the chart that showed what the governor recommended, what the legislature actually did, and then nothing happened, right? So the world is kind of our oyster right now. We can pick and choose from that. There you are, honey. You see that the governor went from 7 to 10 million in the feature-length film refund, and then the legislature didn't change any of it. So, but we know that going from 7 to 10, and it may need to be higher, is really important for the industry. We've heard that loud and clear. So I think we could really base something off this chart and ask for exactly what we want. And we should.
Susie, in that there are financial changes and many of them are add-ons where the state would be spending more money, they can pass a bill now, but don't we have to incorporate this into the budget, which would be voted on at the end of the session?
This came through the budget process last time, and I'll let Guy and anybody else who has long-term expertise on this jump in, but I don't believe that the number that is appropriated every year, yes, that is a budget related issue. This is more of a policy or instruction within that 30 million, 31 million, how it can be spent. So I think this could be handled outside the budget. Guy, do you agree? If I got a budget
Yes,
expert?
sorry. I agree with what you're saying on some of those parameters would be there. It does not necessarily have to be part of the budget process. I think that we've also seen both within film recruitment and other areas where, you know, there have been money allocations done outside of the budget process. It's just not as easy and simple as it is when it's all part of the overall budget discussions.
But I get what you're asking, Bill. We don't want, I mean, obviously, I don't want to wait until July of next year.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, I think, I mean, I do believe that if there's a change, or at least there's more equity within each chamber in terms of, you know, Republican and Democrat and who's in charge and what those margins are. I think that we could achieve some of this, if not all of it, very quickly.
But are you talking about the spending level of 31 million remaining the same?
Well, remember the money is recurring, so
right,
and non-reverting, which means that if there's money left over, it's still ours, right?
No.
The General Assembly can come in and sweep any account they want at any time they're in session.
As they did this year.
Well, they ended up not doing it. They took, did they take 2 million? They took 2 million out of 19 or 20 that was left over, something like that. 14, what was it? Anyway, they did sweep 2 million of it. But they did that in other pots of money as well, not just film. So, and that 31 million, when the legislators start looking at their budget, that's just in there. It's, you know, it's base budget. The only thing they look at is what's expanded. So everything that's recurring is just recurring. So it's pretty safe.
Are we going to make a recommendation to increase that 31 million?
Sure. I think we might as well.
Yeah. If we want to be in the same position we were under Bev Perdue,
right,
we're going to need to.
Or we could recommend that we just return to the old system from 2012.
From your mouth to God's ears.
I think that's worth discussing. I mean,
I think it is too. I mean, and we do touch on it very lightly, but
now that's a headline. That's simplification.
Just take it back.
Yeah, let's just do this. This works great. Let's do this.
It's simple.
Sure enough.
Well, Susie, this is Trey. If we take that step, would it be worthwhile to have conversations during the revenue laws process, the interim process around tax policy and overall discussion of incentives? Go ahead and tee it up before we get into the next long session and engage in an appropriations process.
Sure, we could do that. But of course, we would await, you know, we would want the governor to have completely bought into that direction.
Certainly.
But I don't, you know, again, it is the simplest. Everybody understood it. It was the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It was reviewed by DOR. It was, you know, audited strong. Our program in North Carolina had the strongest audit of any state in the union. When we finished it, When that auditor was finished and closed those books, it was right. And it was above board and they followed the law. I'm sure that still happens now, but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen the same way it did when we were under the tax credit.
Susie,
So,
I think that's a really good, if you're talking about strategy in terms of how the governor and how you guys are proposing this, to sort of take it out of what could be viewed as a political hot potato with Governor Perdue, saying that it's financially, practically, logistically sound. You know, we're not going back to it because this governor that you people didn't like very much did it. We're going back to it because it was sound. It was airtight, productive, and it worked.
And it was audited properly. I'm not, you know, someone else can figure the language out, but that would kind of be my lead in, is not to imply that currently we're not doing it right, because we are. It's just that system was heavily reliant on the Department of Revenue and the auditing process.
And it was airtight.
Yeah.
It was airtight.
Exactly.
No one's going to get away with anything. I question the fact that now there are parameters in the report that you have to present to the state, but you're hiring your own auditor. Each show hires their own auditor from an approved list, but you know, there's never been any hint of any sort of wrongdoing with our incentive. Every state can't say that, and I think that is very very beneficial thing to say to the people who are involved in making the decisions. So I love the idea of putting it back under the Department of Revenue.
Okay.
Let me ask, I mean, the one issue I really want to ask about, and I wasn't involved in the film industry back in 2012, so it's a little before my time, is the minimum expense that qualified for film. Is that what, if we went back to the 2012 program, what would that be? If anyone knows off the top of their head.
There was no threshold.
Okay, wow, that's even better.
Amy, point of clarification. Sorry, Amy, I think what you're asking was the minimum spend requirement, not the annual payout. The minimum spend requirement was $250,000 per project,
which is very reasonable and a lot lower than what we have proposed right now. So
Susie,
yeah.
Can I just say something, because I can't hear that well, so I want to make sure that I'm talking on the same topic. But with regards to be clear from a person who is involved with helping the studios decide where to go, back before we disbanded our whole situation during the previous administration, North Carolina, and I can speak with great knowledge on this, is that North Carolina was pulling almost dead even with Georgia in terms of attracting film because of it wasn't an incentive. We didn't have to discount our points as much as you do here in Georgia. Everything was working really well. Yes, we had a cap on above the line spending, which was always going to be a problem, but it kept our people working on the lower budgeted film, not lower budgeted films,
well,
but
more
the people who weren't spending $1 million, that wasn't the issue. We were really starting to pull even and getting more work, especially as Georgia becomes more and more saturated. Everybody was looking for another place to go. And everybody I know liked filming in North Carolina. When I went to LA with Governor Perdue, everybody said, we want to come, we want to come, we want to come. And that never changed. It wasn't until we disbanded we were really getting close to being a viable competitor to Georgia because of our 25% cash payout, as opposed to a 30% rebate, tax credit. And so if we could just go back to that, it would be a great start.
Is there a way to do that and let the legislature save face somehow without just telling them it was?
As long as there's a change in who's controlling the legislature.
Yeah.
Because the reasons the Republicans wanted this fixed number is so they could budget that fixed number.
And addressing that legislative issue is, once again, going back to an old thing that I keep saying for the past several years, is that we have to educate the people of North Carolina who are making the decisions on how much money and how many people get to work. And we haven't done that well.
Well, yeah, I hear what you're saying, Tim. The issue there is that we had a very powerful organization that was very tied into the former leadership through the John Locke Foundation, that just every time we put a number out there, they disputed it. And they were never right, but they had the gavel. A lot of those people are gone now. Bob Rucho in the Senate was one of our biggest problems. He's gone. You know, but I hear some of the politicians right now that are running for office, one in particular that is running again for office that lost last time, using words like, we can't pick winners and losers. And that's language that Bob Rucho and John Locke Foundation were using in 2010. And that's what they used to attack every incentive program in North Carolina, not just the film incentive. But we, you know, it did not, we got it extended to 2014, but that's as far as we went. One thing we can do is take the concept of writing, you know, legislation, for lack of a better word, and we could give two options. One could be return to the former, and one could be make these changes to the current and present that as an option. But I might need Stephen and Noel to weigh in on that prior to submitting it finally to the governor. But to your point, Tim, yes, I mean, returning to a program that was incredibly successful is an obvious choice, but it is a systemic change. It is a substantive change. We have to change where it goes in the budget. We have to inform DOR and others within the structure of their participation. And so it would be a little bit of education, but it sure would simplify things, because anybody that spent $250,000 or more, and we know you can spend that lickety split, it was all scaled. They only got 25% back of what they spent. So it wasn't like you were fighting over a static pot of money. It was a promise from the state that if you spent X, you would receive, and it qualified, you would receive a 25% rebate after the fact.
Can I add to that that why it works so well for the state and attracting productions is the time. You know, productions want rebates, so they want a quick turnaround. But this was a really good compromise for the state because it was by way of a refund. So the fact of the audit and the length of time between the time you spent and the actual refund worked for longevity of purpose. I think that's really important to communicate to the legislature, that it was a really good compromise that favored the state.
And I think we have the opportunity to do that again with a new group coming in January.
Secretary, excuse me, this is Catherine. It's 11:15. We have 30 more minutes to kind of run through the report. So I think obviously we need to prioritize the recommendations, clarify the legislative changes and prioritize those. But I'm hoping we can maybe at least touch on some of these other sections to make sure that we're all aligned with those as well. Okay, so this would be the second one in terms of assisting the film office in marketing strategy and vision.
And we think the film office has done a fine job marketing. We've been obviously in a very weird situation, first with the change to the grant program, then HB2 on the heels of that. We saw what that did. And now we're coming out of that. We have a new governor in place. He's done a lot for the LGBTQ community with his executive orders. And then obviously COVID. So we think some of our messaging could adapt to these changes and should. And we also, I think we could add the post-production because there's some specificity there. Marketing North Carolina as a good place for post, marketing North Carolina as a good quality of life, marketing North Carolina as a leader in broadband deployment, as well as our low COVID numbers. I mean, we're not going to delve into all of that detail in this report, but I think and then marketing any changes that we make as well. So that's really all this is about.
What's the basis for the low COVID numbers? What is the yardstick there to say we have low COVID numbers?
Well, when you compare to our state to the south, they've not done as well as we have in terms of the outbreak.
That can change overnight.
I know, agreed. And that's why we haven't really pushed it too hard, but in conversation,
right,
it has come up.
Right. Hey, I have one other question, and Guy, maybe you can or cannot answer this. Is it of benefit to have your department in the public-private cooperative, or should it go back under Commerce? I'll take that as a maybe.
I think that they're just like anything else. Sorry, I'm gonna sit on the fence or whatever you want to say on that one. There are pluses and minuses with it. I think that the film office has a great relationship with the Department of Commerce right now, and has access to be able to talk with them. There are things that we're able to do a little more quickly because we're not tied down by some government restrictions. But there certainly are times when it would be more helpful to officially have the state seal be behind me in those efforts. So I have not seen it one way or the other with it. I think that our clients would agree that they don't really know a difference in the service. They haven't seen a disruption in the service that they've gotten today versus 5 years ago.
My curiosity is, would it run smoother under Commerce versus the public-private cooperative?
And this is Susan from the Department of Commerce. Just to be clear, what Guy is doing is the marketing for the program and helping us assemble the information, but the applications themselves are reviewed by the Department of Commerce. The decisions about the grants are made by the Department of Commerce. The administration of the grant payments, all of the grant details are managed by the department as required by the statute. And what we pay EDP&C to do is to market the state. And that's what Guy does very well. We lean heavily on his recommendations, and he is indispensable in helping us kind of keep up and prioritize our program. But the actual administration of it is happening on the Commerce side.
I'm quite familiar with the way that it's structured. I'm just asking the question, would it make sense to take Guy and move him back to Commerce? That's all. We don't have to exhaust the conversation.
Well, everybody knows how I feel about it. I think the whole thing ought to go back to commerce, not just film. But that is another decision that was made at a time when disruption was the flavor of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Secretary, I do have a question, and it's maybe not exactly my place, but because it does fall in this section with regards to recommendation to the film office, there are several bullet points where the intended audience seems to be kind of up in the air with it. And so I didn't know if some of those recommendations might fall into another area. An example is the Humans of New York style campaign, the guest lecture series, stories that rebrand the North Carolina industry. If those are looking at the audience that the state film office currently goes after, which are, as we've discussed, primarily out-of-state productions, or if it's looking at creating an additional audience that may be more in-state facing.
Catherine, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I think that to the comments about, clarifying the different audiences, a lot of these in the marketing section, I think, were to the industry at large, which would, be people in state, out of state, decision makers, etc. But I think, as we've said, to prioritize these and maybe drill down into priority audiences and who we need to hit first. But I think it was industry at large, some of these, especially around some of the outreach and marketing and rebranding efforts.
Hey, Catherine, it's Lindsay here. As I recall, did we discuss highlighting the workforce that's available? I'm thinking, of course, of the students who are graduating from the School of the Arts who are going off to LA and New York and Los Angeles. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with recent graduates who are here in the state looking for work.
Agreed. I think as we talk about, Lindsay, like building out that mentor and workforce development, marketing the types of jobs and increasing opportunities for those types of jobs here in the state is critical, because I don't think that they're students, and it's not just this industry, but across the board, really highlighting what that work looks like within North Carolina would be extremely helpful.
Where do we tackle the workforce in the report? I'm trying. Can you go to that section? Because one thing that we still have, just by the grace of God, I guess, is we are still recognized as a great state crew base, right, Bill? Right, Guy?
Yes, but they're an aging group.
They're an aging group.
They're going to stop working.
Yeah.
If you've got people who are in their late 40s to early 60s, and they've built up a decent retirement, this physical work gets a little tough when you get to be that age. So what we need to do is help to keep the younger people in the state. If somebody starts their career here and then there's no work, they move to Atlanta, chances are they're not coming back.
Yeah.
So we need to get these younger kids trained and retain them.
But to retain them, we have to have the business.
There you go.
But I think it's still worthy of mentioning North Carolina's reputation as a very successful crew base, which is multi-generational, as well as we're producing new people from UNC School of the Arts, the community college programs that we are already in place. And one thing I just thought of is maybe we do need a list in the document of which, calling out not just the School of the Arts, which we've already done, but maybe even listing the community college and university programs that already exist in North Carolina as part of the report.
Yes.
Okay, we can gather that information because, I mean, UNCW has one, and I think Cape Fear Community College. I mean, there are many across the state. We need a
There's
list.
Documentary filmmakers at Wake Forest and Duke as well. I mean, there's a lot of talent,
But there's actual academic programming associated with these. Yeah.
State is actually really good as well.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say North Carolina State right here in Raleigh is actually has produced and is producing a lot of good potential talent as well. But I think getting a big list, very simple. We can draw on a young workforce from these 10 institutions. It's a great idea.
And I would start that paragraph with North Carolina has an international reputation of their crew base, and then lead into the continuum of educating a talented workforce to support.
Where possible, I think we should also talk about the connection institutions have been represented by the crew base. And of course, UNCSA just hit number in the top 10. Hollywood Reporter. So there's a lot of progress there.
Awesome news.
Lauren, can you send us that link to the group?
Yeah, happy to. I'll put it in the chat. The chat.
Thank you. There's some good chats coming through, by the way. Y'all, you might want to go back and take a look at them if you're not seeing them live.
I just feel like with COVID, as well as hopefully a change of the makeup of the General Assembly in November, I mean, I think everyone needs a comeback right now, every industry. And I feel like we can, I don't know if we want to call it rebuilding or bringing back the North Carolina film and television and streaming industry, or, I just hear like we have such a great homegrown set of skills, and we're attracting people in from the outside. And so even if our policy recommendation is to go back to what we had in 2012, I mean, I think it can be positioned as a comeback, and so many of the things we're talking about can all be evidence that makes an argument for that kind of program and that kind of case.
Well, we could brand the report differently. We could call it Take 4, or, I mean, truly, I mean, we might as well, make that part pop too.
I would think about it. And I mean, my background's in science originally, and I feel like we ran the experiment with the former program, and we ran the recent experiment against our will. And I'm just hearing a lot of support that what we had before really, really worked. And you can compare it side by side. And if there's a political will to bring it back, I wouldn't hesitate to make that argument.
Okay.
From a branding perspective and from a messaging perspective, something as simple as saying North Carolina is open for business, a word will spread in the industry very, very, very fast.
Mm-hmm. I think for legislators who still, I'm haunted by the visit I made as early in my time at the school, there was a poster on somebody's door. She had said, I turned away handouts to millionaire film directors or something. So the perception is that I think there's still going to be the perception in the legislature that these are, handouts to directors. And I think it's important this isn't just about film, it's about driving and growing the creative economy, which might be a more palatable way of positioning it, that the film, television, digital streaming is really just a part of kind of the creative economy, which is enormous in North Carolina. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Well, it is. I mean, but we also promoted it as a green economy too. It's a clean industry.
Yeah.
But at the time, those were the people we were talking to didn't want clean industries. They wanted fracking. I mean, so I think taking into
They don't want to hear the word creative either.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing.
Say that again, Rebecca.
They don't like the word creative either. I mean, it's
but
really
of the good news is a lot of those folks are gone.
The thing that I think might be beneficial to promote is that most of the people on these films are highly skilled blue collar workers.
Yeah, they're plumbers and electricians.
Yeah, and
that's a great point.
They do. A painter that works on a set is not the same guy that's going to paint your kitchen. It's a highly skilled job. I'm sorry I gendered that. I said
this
God.
is exactly the point that it seems like it's educating the people who are making the rules and who are pushing us. That's who needs to understand that it is the carpenter and the electrician. I mean, it's to Lindsay's point. I mean, it's like we're a benefit. We're a clean. There's so many positives to this, and most importantly, it's not cocktail parties and red carpets. It's hardworking individuals, and that's the part that's missing. That's what they do think, that we're subsidizing cocktail parties at Susan Sarandon's house. I mean, that these are Republican hating liberals that are just taking advantage of us, and that's what we have to combat.
I wonder if there's just a visual as a part of the, just thinking of the audience, the legislature, if there's a visual of the people in rural communities who are actually impacted. Maybe that exists already, but if we're, because we are talking about carpenters, we're talking about people who are renting houses. So people who, have a rental house, we're talking about caterers, we're talking about lumber, local, lumber yards, etc. I wonder if there's a way. Rebecca, do you have that? You may have that.
There was a video put out a few years ago. Do you guys remember that? Someone, I think out of Wilmington, did one, and they interviewed all these different people that worked behind the scenes. But I agree with you. Something like that needs to be done with the, these blue collar workers and businesses in these rural communities that benefit from film production, because they're not liberals. They're
right.
So, I think they need to see another side of the story. So.
Tim, you're on set right now. Is anybody working with your crew that was from North Carolina?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Did you get one of your ADs to put something together?
I'm sorry,
Even
what's
if
that?
It's a 5-minute piece.
I didn't hear you. What'd you say?
Could you get somebody on your team to throw together a 5-minute piece interviewing your carpenters, your trades folks?
I can do that. Eric and I have been sort of talking about producing. We're looking for a writer, in fact, to produce this thing that we've been talking about. That is some kind of creative concept that illustrates this point. And yes, I can do iPhone clips,
right?
Testimonials from North Carolinians that are here on this particular set, even that are working. I have Mike Leone, script supervisor, just came in from North Carolina. I have a video assist operator but Eric and we need a writer, because I'm not one, I'm a producer, to write a very charming, educational, and most important, short piece that we can distribute, whether it's online or in a hard copy disc, to the legislators to say, look, these are the people we're talking about. These are the people that this incentive helps. But we haven't come up. I had a guy, but he's in Scotland right now, and he can't do it. He can't get back into the country, in fact.
Oh, gosh.
But anyway, that's another story.
And Catherine Swain, do you think there's somebody on our team, like a Sandra or somebody that, or does this need to come out of the industry? I mean, surely between all of us on this call, we got a writer.
I think we could certainly seek collaboration on so script and messaging for that, but we can talk about that for sure.
Okay. Okay. I think that would be very powerful. And I think it's something that the governor could rely on as well.
This is something we've been talking about for a long, long time, and we just never have actually been able to follow through with it.
Well, we would like to support you and Eric pulling that together, Tim. So if you want us to take a shot at a small script, and
yeah, it should be like a commercial length, you know, like it can't be more. You're better at this than I am. I've been told that the legislators can't really hold your attention for more than 30 seconds or 60 seconds. So
no, you can't hold the legislators' attention for more than 30 seconds.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So it just needs to be, it needs to be soulful, humorous, and informative, and well produced, which I can.
Which you can do. Okay.
Well, I can't, but I know people who can.
Okay. Well, we'll start. What are you thinking? 45 seconds to a minute?
Yeah, no more than a minute. But you're the expert on that in terms of whatever you think they can withstand.
Okay.
Oh, you can go more than a minute, sure.
At least 3 to get the point across. You want volume, right? You want to hit as many different industry and quick testimonials as possible. I mean, clearly we have alumni that can help in this regard.
I think that I agree with what you're saying in theory, but what I'm being told by the political experts in the past is that it can't be long, otherwise they won't watch it.
Well, let's do a 3-minute version, and then we can always do cut downs because that will serve other purposes to educate the community at large about the industry. So we can pull a 15-second out of a 3-minute, but let's at least have that, you know, the expanded piece.
You need that 30-second elevator pitch where you're going to grab them and then see if you can't get a 5-minute meeting. So I agree. The most important one is that short pitch that makes the point.
And the visuals. We need to see them with a hammer in their hand.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, and Lauren, to your point, we can. You've got folks that on your team or your alumni.
Absolutely, happy to put them focused on this kind of initiative. I also think we should consider that a version of this, producers, directors, writers, above the line talent is also local.
Right.
It's not. I think that there's a version of this that we need to consider to say it's, you know, top down, bottom up. The entire industry is here if we want it to be.
Okay. Well, Tim and Eric and Lauren, could we challenge the 3 of you to get online, get together, and just have a quick conversation about where you'd like to see this go?
Absolutely.
And we will support you in, you know, in getting the message out. However, we can back you up.
Yes, I'm in. Eric, yeah.
No, I am.
I'm in.
All right, we'll talk later this week, please.
That's great.
Thank you.
And if there's anything I can do too, I'm happy to help because I know vendors who around here who have benefited from film productions and location owners that are big Republican donors. So I think that might be interesting too. I don't know.
Show it to them.
Yeah.
Did you know, I think I mentioned this before, but did you know that Wilmington PD used to use the film industry as a way of luring out-of-state people into getting them to work in our city? because of the I'm not saying from the cachet of it, but from the off duty hours and the high pay that we give them. And that was told to me by the Wilmington Police Department several years ago.
Yep. Very true. They love that OT.
If this becomes a part of the visual in the report, do we still get, for example, tourism? Does Dirty Dancing still drive tourism for Lake Lure after all these years?
Sure.
You know, so that's another.
They're still doing Dawson Creek
Yeah.
tours and One Tree Hill reunions and Wilmington. I mean, it's
Yeah. I mean, I think people have forgotten about that, take it for granted, but it's still a part of the draw.
Y'all, I had a legislator who I won't name, who, when I was still in the General Assembly, who voted against me every time the word film came up. He said, we just spent the weekend in Wilmington. We took the Dawson's Creek tour. And I was like, then why don't you support the legislation? You know, don't come to me all excited if you know, it's, there was that, and that was in 2014 or 2015, I'm sure. There's that kind of, you know, disconnection for some reason, but yes, we need to put, one thing I know, I'm looking at this for a fourth or fifth time, we need to put some more visuals in here, and it needs to include shots of people building sets. We could even go in and put in testimonials from what's the wood distributor in Wilmington, Bill?
Goddard?
Godwin's?
Godwin.
Godwin's. Iron Man spent $1 million in like 1 week buying lumber from Godwin's. I mean, you know, I was at a store one time at Joe Banks when a guy walked in. He did a walk to every stand inside the store, dumped it all on the front desk, handed him a credit card and left. He was out of there in like 12 minutes. I said, who was that guy? And they said he works for One Tree Hill. And he just dropped $3,500 on costumes. And so, you know.
Could we get a statement from Lowe's corporate in Mooresville? Because the Moores trucks were, I mean, the Lowe's trucks were a prominent feature on our campus when the soundstage was rented by, I think it was Matt Weiner.
It was Matt Weiner.
Yeah.
Okay.
The local people who work on these shows go out of their way to work with small local vendors as opposed to the Lowe's.
They know what it means to their bottom line.
And they'll tell you the lumber is much better with the local vendors than it is with Lowe's.
Yeah, I mentioned Lowe's only because it is a North Carolina.
That's true.
Headquarters. So.
Okay. Well, we'll take some of that on, but it's because we're getting a little short on time, and I know we've sort of gone several different directions, but that's okay. I think it's all been very helpful. I think what DNCR and our team needs to do at this point is write 2 different pieces of legislation. They're already practically written. One's very simple, as an addendum to the report. I would like for you all to, if you have something you think needs to be added or reformatted, I would like for you to do that and to send it to Catherine and let us look at those things and see how we can integrate them and improve the report. And then we will come back together. I would like to have this report to the governor probably sometime in late October, if that's feasible. A short video would maybe even be helpful to share with him before by the end of October, if that's possible. And we will just keep refining the report based on what you all shared with us today and what you will be sharing with us in the next few weeks. Is that feasible? Does that, can y'all meet those expectations?
I think as long as you put deadlines in there for these projects, it's really helpful for me to prioritize things that way.
Okay. Any draft language that you'd like to add or reformatting that you'd like to see then? What's today? The 15th?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say by the end of the month. Give you a couple of weeks to come up with your thoughts.
By the 30th.
Susie, is there an official channel for us to communicate with each other than just mass emails?
Catherine, do we
have the Google Drive that is active, and it is a shared drive to put files, and obviously we could set up an additional
is there a messaging platform that you use
internally? We use Microsoft Teams, and it's very easy to set this group up as a team within that system. Why
don't you do that? I think that's a good idea.
Okay. No problem.
Is that subject to public laws that we need, like sunshine laws that we need to keep in mind?
Well, anything that we communicate, you all, is, I mean, just keep that in mind. It's fair game. Like if we were asked for it, we would have to provide it, which is okay. I mean, I think, but just in your comments, just be mindful of that.
Okay, well, I think we've come to our time on report feedback, and Secretary, thank you. I think you all have my email address, but I will make sure to send it out so that you all have it, so you can send me edits. And then I'll work on the Microsoft Teams. If you do not have Microsoft Teams, go ahead and install it, and then when I add your name, you'll be added into this group.
If you need any technical support,
call you.
I won't help you, but someone will.
Is that its own thing? Microsoft Teams? It's not like part of Office or something, is it?
It actually is part of the Microsoft Office suite.
Okay.
Amy, but you do not necessarily have to. You can still join in Teams, if you don't have a institutional Microsoft system. So we've been using it pretty successfully.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's pretty secure, isn't it? I mean,
yes, and they have really, they've improved it so much since March, and there's constant updates coming out. As long as you keep it updated, it's actually been a really great system for us. Okay, so I was just going to remind everyone, we do have another meeting on the books for December 10th. And we'll send out obviously the invitation and call-in information for that. I'm sure we'll be speaking lots prior to that next meeting and getting these materials and recommendations refined to deliver to the governor's office by the end of October. So thank you. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you need anything. And Secretary, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, everybody. I mean, really, truly, this has been a heavy lift for our staff. I want to thank Catherine and her team, and Stacy and Matt and others who are they have really put a tremendous amount of time into this. You all have put a tremendous amount of your personal time into this, and I know it's been a little strange. We're all trying to figure out how to do our jobs all over again, but we appreciate what you're doing. The governor appreciates what you're doing. The time we spent over the summer through Judy's connections and making those connections with the governor's office, he was ready at a moment's notice. He was ready to stop what he was doing and go have those conversations because he understands how important they are. He understands how clean this industry is, how many jobs it supports, its connection to education in the state. Just, he really, really gets it. And he's pleased with the work you have done so far. So thank you, everyone, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Susie.
All right, everybody. Have a
Thank
great
you.
week.
Thanks,
Talk to you
everybody.
soon.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, John.
Hey, Bill.
How are you?
Good.
Are you working?
No, nothing.